The white envelope sitting on my kitchen counter looked completely harmless, but it held enough poison to destroy my entire life. I stood there in the quiet morning light, my coffee mug cooling in my hand, staring at the bold red stamp across the front. Certified mail, legal summons. My heart began to thud heavily against my ribs, a cold, familiar dread washing over me. I didn't need to open it to know who sent it. There were only 4 people in the world who would send a process server to my front door on a beautiful Tuesday morning. My own flesh and blood. My mother, my stepfather, and my 2 adult half-siblings. When I finally forced my trembling fingers to slice open the paper, the words jumped out like physical blows. They weren't just asking for money anymore. They were suing me for $500,000. The lawsuit claimed that the tech consulting business I had spent 10 years building with my own sweat, sleepless nights, and empty bank accounts was actually family property. It alleged that because my stepfather had given me $1,000 for a broken-down car a decade ago, he was a foundational investor entitled to half of everything I owned. I leaned against the counter, the room spinning as tears of absolute betrayal blurred my vision. For years, I had been the family piggy bank. I was the one who paid off my mother's credit cards, bought my brother a new truck when he wrecked his, and funded my sister's lavish destination wedding. I did it because I loved them. I did it because I thought that if I was generous enough, if I sacrificed enough of my own life, they would finally love me back. But a predator doesn't love the provider. A predator only loves the feast. And the moment I finally said the word no, they decided to destroy me. They thought I was the same weak, guilt-ridden girl they had manipulated for 30 years. They thought I would panic, cry, and offer them a massive cash settlement just to keep the peace. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 48 hours in a dark office downtown with a man named Arthur Vance, a ruthless, brilliant defense attorney who specialized in exposing family greed. As I stared at the legal summons, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my mother. It read, "Withdraw the lawsuit against us for our share, or we will tell the whole world what a selfish, ungrateful daughter you are. See you in court, Clara." I wiped my eyes, a sudden, icy calm replacing the panic in my chest. I picked up my phone and forwarded the text directly to my lawyer. He replied within 30 seconds with a single line. "Excellent. Let them get comfortable in their greed. The trap is already set." To understand how my own mother could drag me into a courtroom to strip me of my livelihood, you have to understand the dynamic of the house I grew up in. I was the daughter from my mother's first marriage. My biological father passed away when I was just a toddler, leaving my mother with a modest life insurance policy and a small piece of land. When I was 6, she married Richard, a smooth-talking salesman who never quite managed to keep a steady job, but always managed to live beyond his means. Within a few years, they had 2 children of their own, my half-brother Leo and my half-sister Maya. From the moment Leo and Maya were born, the invisible boundary lines in our household were drawn in iron. They were the golden children. I was the shadow. Leo was a star athlete who could do no wrong, even when he caught his high school's gym on fire during a prank. Maya was the beautiful princess whose every whim was a command. My mother and Richard poured every ounce of affection, praise, and financial resource into them. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, studious child who wore hand-me-down clothes and spent my weekends working at a local grocery store to pay for my own school supplies. I remember vividly the day I graduated high school as the valedictorian of my class. I stood on that stage, looking out into the crowded auditorium, searching for my family. My mother and Richard had left early because Leo had an amateur baseball game 2 towns over. I walked home alone in my cap and gown, holding my diploma in a plastic folder, while they were at a diner celebrating a game Leo didn't even play in. "Clara, you're the smart one," my mother would tell me whenever I expressed hurt or sadness. "You don't need us to worry about you. Leo and Maya are sensitive. They need our support. You need to be strong for your siblings." Being strong meant that by the time I worked my way through college on scholarships and 2 jobs, I was expected to start carrying their financial burdens. When I landed my first corporate accounting and data analysis job, Richard lost his job again. My mother called me, sobbing on the phone, telling me they couldn't make the mortgage payment on their suburban home. "Clara, please," she begged, her voice cracking with theatrical panic. "If you don't lend us $5,000, we will be on the street. Your brother won't be able to finish his senior year. Do this for your family." I didn't have $5,000. I had to take out a high-interest personal loan in my own name to send her that money. They never paid back a single cent. In fact, they didn't even thank me. The next month, I saw photos on social media of Richard, Leo, and Maya on an expensive jet skiing trip. When I confronted my mother, she simply brushed it off. "Richard needed the stress relief, Clara. Don't be so keeping score with your own family. It's ugly." That was the pattern that defined my entire 20s. I broke my back to build a life, and they treated my bank account like an open ATM. When I turned 28, I decided I couldn't live in the corporate rat race anymore. I had spent years developing a unique data optimization software program that helped mid-sized logistics companies cut their operational waste by 40%. I quit my secure job, moved into a tiny, drafty studio apartment, and survived on instant noodles and coffee for 18 months to launch my business, Apex Solutions. During that startup phase, my family completely ghosted me. When I called my mother to tell her I was scared about making rent, she immediately cut me off. "Well, Clara, you chose to leave a good job to chase a silly dream. We don't have money to waste on your hobbies. Richard is trying to fund Leo's new car detailing business right now." The only time Richard interacted with my business was when my old sedan completely died on the way to a crucial client pitch. Out of options, I swallowed my pride and asked him if he could help me. He gave me $1,000 in cash to buy a beat-up, rusted pickup truck from his friend. He made me sign a scrap of notebook paper that said, "Clara owes Richard $1,000 for transport assistance." I paid him back that $1,000 plus $200 interest exactly 3 weeks later, ensuring I got a signed receipt. I thought that was the end of it. Against all odds, my software caught the attention of a major national supply chain corporation. They signed a 5-year licensing contract with Apex Solutions. Virtually overnight, my small company went from a struggling project into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I moved into a beautiful, modest home, hired a small team of engineers, and finally felt the sweet relief of financial security. The moment the local business journal published an article about my company's success with my photo on the cover, my phone exploded. Suddenly, I was no longer the ungrateful daughter chasing a silly dream. I was the savior of the family. My mother started calling me 3 times a day, telling me how proud she always was of her brilliant valedictorian. Richard started pitching me ridiculous multi-million-dollar real estate ideas that required me to put up all the capital while he managed the vision. Leo wanted me to buy him a franchise business, and Maya expected me to pay off her $30,000 of designer clothing debt. For a long time, the old guilt held me captive. I bought my mother a luxury vacation, paid off the back taxes on their house, and gave Leo a high-paying job at my company as a logistics coordinator. But Leo didn't want to work. He would show up to the office at noon, insult my engineers, use his corporate expense card to buy expensive dinners for his friends, and explicitly tell my staff that he was the real boss because he was family. The breaking point arrived on my mother's 60th birthday. I had organized a beautiful, expensive private dinner at a 5-star restaurant downtown, paying for the entire event out of my own pocket. I thought it would be a night of genuine celebration, but the moment the main course was served, Richard tapped his glass with a spoon and stood up, looking around the table with a theatrical, wide grin. "Family, I have a massive announcement to make," Richard said, his voice boisterous and confident. As you all know, Apex Solutions has been doing incredibly well, thanks to the foundational support we all gave Clara in the early days. Today, Leo and I have officially drafted a new corporate partnership agreement. We are expanding Apex into heavy equipment leasing. Clara is going to sign over 49% of her corporate shares to Leo and me, and we are going to secure a $2 million business loan using Clara's personal house and corporate assets as collateral. Let's raise a glass to the new family empire. The entire table clapped and cheered. Maya clinked her glass against Leo's, while my mother beamed with pride, reaching over to pat Richard's hand. They were all smiling, laughing, already spending the money in their minds. None of them had even bothered to look at me. I sat perfectly still, my fork resting on my plate, my blood turning to absolute ice. They hadn't asked me. They hadn't consulted my board of directors. They had simply decided that my company, my hard work, and my personal home belonged to them to risk on a reckless gamble. "No," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the laughter like a cold wind. The table went completely silent. Richard's grin faltered, his eyes narrowing sharply. "What did you say, Clara?" "I said no, Richard." I stood up, looking at each of them across the candlelit table. "I am not signing over 49% of my company to anyone. I am certainly not putting my personal home up as collateral for a business loan for a heavy equipment venture that has nothing to do with my software. Leo has done nothing but abuse his corporate card since I hired him. This dinner is over." My mother's face instantly twisted into an expression of pure, venomous rage. She slammed her glass down so hard the wine spilled across the white tablecloth. "How dare you!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the elegant restaurant, causing the guests at nearby tables to turn and stare. "How dare you speak to your father like that? You are a selfish, cold-hearted monster, Clara. Everything you have is because of this family. If Richard hadn't given you that $1,000 when you were a broke nobody, your little company would have died in the dirt. We carried you for years, and now that you're rich, you want to leave your brother and sister to starve? You are a parasite." "I paid Richard back every dollar of that money with interest, Mom," I shouted back, the tears finally burning my eyes. "I paid your mortgage. I paid for Maya's wedding. I have given you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it is never enough." "It will never be enough until you show some loyalty," Leo yelled, standing up and pointing an aggressive finger at my face. "You think you're better than us because of some stupid software? We made you, Clara, and we can take it all away from you. You're going to regret this night for the rest of your life." I picked up my purse, left a stack of $100 bills on the table to cover the dinner, and walked out into the cold night air, my body shaking with a profound, soul-crushing sorrow. I had finally seen behind the mask. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. To them, I was just a resource to be mined until there was nothing left but an empty shell. The next morning, Leo didn't show up to work. Instead, my corporate bank account notified me that he had attempted to wire $50,000 of company funds to a private account overnight. Luckily, my accountant blocked the transaction. I officially terminated Leo's employment that afternoon. 3 days later, the certified legal summons arrived at my house. The morning I walked into Arthur Vance's legal office downtown, I felt like a defeated soldier. The mahogany bookshelves and floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city skyline usually made me feel inspired, but today, they just felt cold. I laid the lawsuit documents on his massive glass desk, my head dropping into my hands. "They're suing me for partnership rights, Arthur," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They have a copy of that notebook paper I signed when Richard gave me the $1,000 for the truck. Their lawyer is claiming it was a verbal agreement for a 50% equity stake in all future business ventures launched by Apex Solutions. They're demanding an immediate audit of my books and an injunction to freeze my operating accounts." Arthur Vance leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his sharp features. He didn't look worried at all. In fact, his eyes looked like a hunter who had just spotted an easy target. "Clara, in my 30 years of handling high-asset estate and corporate litigation, I have learned one absolute truth," Vance said, his voice calm, confident, and steady. "The greedier a family is, the more reckless they become. They think that because they shared a dining table with you, the rules of evidence don't apply to them. They are walking into a trap of their own making." "But what about the notebook paper signature?" I asked, panic flaring in my chest. "It's my handwriting." $1,000 personal loan for a vehicle purchase does not constitute a corporate equity contract, Clara," Vance explained, tapping his fingers together. "Especially since you have a signed, dated receipt proving you paid the loan back in full 3 weeks later. But we aren't just going to defend against their ridiculous lawsuit. We are going to launch a full forensic audit of every single dollar you have given them over the last 5 years." For the next week, Vance and his team of private investigators and forensic accountants went to work. We pulled every bank statement, every wire transfer log, every Zelle payment, and every text message from my phone. As the numbers began to populate the spreadsheets, a massive, hidden horror story began to emerge. Over the past 4 years, I had transferred a total of $280,000 directly to my mother and Richard to cover medical emergencies, mortgage relief, and business investment support. But our investigators didn't stop at my bank accounts. They subpoenaed the public records of Richard's alleged car detailing business and Leo's personal tax filings. "Look at this, Clara," Arthur Vance said, sliding a thick ledger across his desk during our late-night session. 2 years ago, you gave your mother $80,000 because she claimed Richard needed an emergency heart procedure and they had no insurance. Do you remember that? Yes, I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I was panicking. I transferred the money within an hour. Well, Richard never visited a hospital that month, Vance said coldly, pulling up a set of certified financial records. That exact $80,000 was wired directly into a casino junket account in Las Vegas. Richard and Leo spent 3 weeks living in a luxury penthouse suite on your dime. Your mother knew about it because she signed the casino registration forms with him. I sat frozen, the betrayal cutting so deep I felt physically sick. They had faked a fatal heart condition just to gamble away my hard-earned software revenue. And there's more, Vance smiled, his eyes flashing with a predatory brilliance. When Leo was working at your company, he submitted 12 separate corporate reimbursement requests for client development dinners, totaling $40,000. We tracked the merchant receipts. Those dinners were actually down payments for a custom luxury boat that Leo registered in his own name using a fake corporate tax ID number. Clara, your family hasn't just been greedy. They have committed felony grand larceny and wire fraud against your corporation. They think they are coming to a civil court to collect a check. They have no idea we are bringing a mountain of criminal evidence to the table. Instead of revealing our evidence early, Arthur Vance advised me to stay completely silent. We allowed their aggressive attorney, a loud, media-hungry lawyer named Mr. Sneed, to file motion after motion, boasting to the local business blogs that a exploited family was finally fighting back against a greedy tech millionaire. My mother even did a live stream on her social media, sitting in her living room, weeping for her followers. "We gave Clara everything," she sobbed to the camera. "We sacrificed our own comfort so she could build her business, and now that she is a millionaire, she has fired her own brother and left us with nothing. We are just asking for our fair share." The comments were brutal. Strangers called me a monster, a snake, and an ungrateful brat. Some clients even emailed my company, asking if the allegations were true. My team was terrified, but every time I panicked, Arthur Vance would look at me with absolute calm assurance. "Let them talk, Clara," Vance said smoothly. The higher an arrogant person climbs on a mountain of lies, the harder they hit the ground when the truth pulls the rug out. Sneed has demanded an emergency mandatory settlement hearing before Judge Harrison this Thursday. They think they have you cornered because of the bad public relations. They expect you to sign a $300,000 settlement contract just to make the internet comments stop. "I'm not giving them a single penny, Arthur," I said, my voice completely firm. "Oh, you won't have to," Vance laughed. "In fact, by the time Thursday afternoon arrives, they are going to wish they had never even learned your name." On Wednesday night, the evening before the hearing, my brother Leo called me from an unknown number. The moment I answered, I could hear the sound of loud music and clinking glasses in the background. He was clearly celebrating early with his friends. "Hey, big sis," Leo sneered, his voice thick with arrogance. "Tomorrow's the big day. Mom and Richard are already looking at a new beach house in Florida. Sneed says you're going to fold like a cheap lawn chair because your corporate reputation can't take the hit. If you want to call me right now and offer me an extra $50,000 privately, maybe I'll convince Mom to tell the internet you're not a total monster. What do you say?" I listened to his voice, feeling a strange, profound sense of detachment. This was the boy I had bought a truck for. This was the brother I had protected from our stepfather's anger when we were kids. He felt zero remorse. He felt zero love. He truly believed he was entitled to strip my life down to the bone. "I'll see you in court tomorrow, Leo," I said softly, and hung up the phone. Thursday morning arrived with a blinding, heavy rain that poured over the stone pillars of the county probate and family court. Settlement Room 4B was a large, modern conference space with a long oak table, leather chairs, and a massive projection screen on the far wall. Sitting on the left side of the table was my family, looking like a united, victorious army. My mother wore an elegant, simple gray dress, her eyes surrounded by theatrical makeup designed to make her look tired and weary. Richard sat next to her, wearing a flashy, cheap suit, checking his gold-plated watch with a smug, self-assured smile. Leo and Maya sat behind them, whispering to each other and snickering as Arthur Vance and I walked into the room. Their attorney, Mr. Sneed, was a short, aggressive man with a loud voice and a bright red tie. He didn't even wait for the mediator to open the session before he slammed a thick document onto the center of the table. "Let's not waste anyone's time here today, Vance," Sneed said boisterously, leaning over the table with an arrogant grin. "My clients have a rock-solid claim of foundational partnership equity. We have the signed contract showing the $1,000 initial investment from Richard. We have the public record of Leo working as an executive coordinator at the firm. And we have the public relations nightmare your client is currently facing. We are prepared to dismiss the lawsuit today in exchange for a lump sum cash payment of $350,000 and a monthly $5,000 consulting stipend for Leo for the next 5 years. If you refuse, we walk straight into the courtroom next door, and we will dismantle Apex Solutions live in front of the media." My mother leaned forward, her voice dripping with artificial, sorrowful concern. "Clara, please, just sign the paper. Don't let your greed destroy this family. We want to forgive you, but you have to do what's right for your brother and sister." I didn't say a word. I looked at Arthur Vance. Vance slowly opened his leather briefcase, pulled out a small black remote control, and pointed it at the massive projection screen on the wall. He didn't look at Sneed. He looked directly at my stepfather, Richard, whose smug smile suddenly wavered. "Mr. Sneed, your proposal is highly entertaining," Vance said, his voice dropping into a low, terrifyingly calm rumble that instantly commanded the room. "But before we discuss any cash settlements, we need to review the formal counterclaims and evidence that we are introducing to the court clerk today. Let's look at the actual financial relationship between my client and her loving family." Vance clicked the remote, and the screen flashed to life. A massive, color-coded spreadsheet appeared, detailing every single transaction I had sent to my mother over the past 5 years. As you can see, Exhibit 1 proves that Clara Miller has paid a total of $280,000 in direct cash support to the petitioners, Vance announced clearly, his voice cutting through the room like a razor. The $1,000 loan Mr. Richard is bragging about was paid back in full, with $1,200 total cash, exactly 21 days after it was issued. Here is the certified bank receipt and Richard's own signature confirming the debt was fully satisfied. Mr. Sneed flinched, turning his head sharply to look at Richard. "Richard, you told me the loan was never repaid," Sneed whispered aggressively. I forgot about that one," Richard stammered, his face turning a deep, unnatural shade of red as he adjusted his collar. "That was just for the truck. We're talking about the verbal partnership." "Let's talk about the verbal partnership then," Vance countered smoothly, clicking the remote again. The screen changed to a series of certified bank logs from the Las Vegas Grand Casino. 2 years ago, Mrs. Miller received $80,000 from my client under the explicit, written text claim that Richard was undergoing an emergency heart procedure and needed immediate funds for surgery. Sneed, if you look at the official casino ledger on the screen, you will see that exact $80,000 was deposited into Richard's gambling account less than 3 hours after Clara wired the money. This is not a business investment, Mr. Sneed. This is a documented case of criminal theft by deception, a Class B felony. My mother gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she looked at the screen in absolute horror. Her carefully constructed mask of a grieving, exploited mother completely shattered. "This is a lie. You can't prove that," Leo shouted, standing up from his chair, his fists clenched. "Sit down, young man," Vance snapped, his voice carrying an immense, terrifying authority that caused Leo to instantly drop back into his seat. Vance clicked the remote a third time. Let's look at Leo's corporate expense history while he was employed at Apex Solutions. Here are 12 separate corporate reimbursement filings where Leo claimed $40,000 for client retention dinners. And here, on the right side of the screen, are the corresponding internal wire logs showing Leo used that corporate cash as a down payment for a private luxury boat registered under his own name using a fraudulent corporate tax ID number. That is grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement. Mr. Sneed looked at the screen, then looked at Leo, then looked at the thick stack of evidence folders Vance's team had piled on the table. Sneed's face went completely white. He slowly closed his laptop, slid his chair back, and stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Vance," Sneed stammered, his loud, aggressive persona completely vanishing. My clients did not provide me with these specific transaction histories during our initial consultation. If this evidence is verified, I cannot ethically represent them in this matter. I am withdrawing our petition for settlement immediately." "You can't withdraw!" Richard yelled, panic exploding in his voice as he grabbed Sneed's arm. "We have a contract. She owes us." "You have nothing but an impending criminal indictment, Richard," Arthur Vance said coldly, leaning over the table, his gray eyes locked onto my stepfather like two pieces of flint. "We have already filed a formal corporate fraud and grand larceny complaint with the District Attorney's White-Collar Crime Division. The investigators are already reviewing these exact logs. We aren't offering you $350,000. We are offering you exactly 10 minutes to sign this unconditional dismissal of all claims with prejudice, alongside a formal confession of corporate embezzlement drafted by my office. If you sign it right now, Clara has agreed to ask the DA for leniency regarding jail time for Leo. If you don't sign it, the bailiff next door will have handcuffs ready for your son before the sun goes down." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the steady, heavy sound of the rain beating against the glass windows. My mother began to cry, but these weren't the theatrical, beautifully practiced tears she used for her social media videos. These were the quiet, frantic tears of a person who realized that her greed had finally broken her family beyond repair. Leo sat frozen, his head down, his hands shaking violently as he stared at the corporate fraud logs displaying his name and the fraudulent tax ID. The luxury boat, the flashy dinners, the early celebrations, it had all turned into a concrete cage. "Clara, please," my mother whispered across the table, her voice shaking as she reached her hand out toward me. "Please don't do this to your brother. He's young. He made a mistake. We're your family. We love you." I looked at her, looking past the makeup and the desperate expression. For 30 years, I had hungered for those words. "We love you." I would have given her everything I owned just to hear them and believe them. But looking at her now, sitting across from a mountain of evidence that proved they had faked a heart condition just to gamble away my future, the hunger was completely gone. I felt nothing but a deep, clean, and beautiful sense of freedom. "If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have brought a process server to my home," I said softly, my voice completely steady. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied to the world to call me a monster. Sign the paper." Richard snatched the pen from Sneed's trembling hand. With a shaky, desperate motion, he scribbled his signature at the bottom of Vance's unconditional dismissal document. He pushed it over to Leo, who signed it without looking up, a tear dropping onto the clean white paper. My mother signed last, her hand trembling so badly the ink looped wildly outside the line. Arthur Vance picked up the document, examined the signatures with a cold, professional eye, and neatly slid it into his briefcase. He snapped the brass locks shut with a loud, satisfying click. "This matter is legally concluded," Vance announced. "The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice, meaning you can never file a claim against Clara or Apex Solutions for the rest of your lives. The corporate card fraud files will remain with the DA, but as agreed, we will notify them of your full cooperation and restitution agreement. Get out of our room." They stood up slowly, a broken, defeated line of predators who had finally run out of prey. Richard didn't look at me. Leo and Maya walked out with their heads down, while my mother lingered in the doorway for a brief second, looking back at me with eyes filled with a mixture of shame and deep regret. I didn't turn away, but I didn't smile either. I just watched them disappear down the long, quiet corridor until the door swung shut, erasing them from my life forever. 2 weeks after the settlement hearing, the rain had cleared, replaced by a warm, golden summer afternoon. I sat on the back deck of my home, a quiet breeze rustling the leaves of the old oak trees in my yard, holding a cup of hot tea. My company's legal department had issued a brief, factual statement to the business blogs, confirming that the frivolous family lawsuit had been completely dismissed and that all claims of corporate partnership were legally fraudulent. The public comments instantly changed. The same strangers who had called me a monster were now praising me for my strength and resilience. My mother had deleted her social media videos, and our investigators confirmed that Richard and Leo had put their luxury boat up for sale to pay off the corporate embezzlement debts before the formal DA review. But as I sat there in the quiet safety of my own life, I didn't feel a sense of cruel celebration. Exposing your own family in a cold courtroom doesn't leave you feeling joyful. It leaves you feeling a deep, quiet sobriety. This painful journey taught me the ultimate moral lesson about love and boundaries. In this life, we are taught that family is an absolute bond, that because we share the same bloodline, we are required to endure endless exploitation, manipulation, and disrespect. We are told that setting boundaries against a toxic parent or sibling makes us selfish, ungrateful, and cold. But the truth is, bloodlines do not grant people a license to destroy your peace, your hard work, and your mental health. Generosity without boundaries is not love, it is enablement. And the moment you finally find the courage to say no to a predator, you aren't destroying the family. You are simply forcing the hidden truth out into the light. I built Apex Solutions with my own 2 hands, but the greatest asset I ever secured wasn't a software contract or a multi-million-dollar bank balance. It was the absolute, unshakable ownership of my own life. I walked through the fire of their betrayal and came out on the other side completely clean, surrounded by truth, integrity, and a beautiful golden peace that no amount of family guilt can ever take away from me again.